Colonel Calvin DeMood had taken extra care to ensure his uniform was in perfect condition before David's arrival, partly because it was how a Marine functioned, but he also worried about what the day would bring. While every action Calvin had taken felt wholly justified under Coalition law, he couldn't set aside that he'd knowingly exceeded his mandate to provide training, advice, and intelligence to the indigenous population. Since David had explicitly requested a private meeting before touring the Joint Intelligence Task Force facility, Calvin thought he would probably get a tongue-lashing at best, or dismissal from command. Still, he was proud of his actions and those of everyone who'd served on Zevlot. The General's a fair man. I know he'll see what we did here was the right thing. The door to the small meeting area swung open, and David strode in. Calvin sprang to his feet and came to attention. "Sir, wasn't expecting you for another 20 minutes. Apologies." David flashed a smile. "To my immense surprise, it took less time than I expected to discuss the nanite situation with Zupan Vogt and come to an agreement." "Now at ease." He dropped into a chair. Calvin counted off a couple of seconds before he sat as well. "I'm fully prepared for any punishment you wish to hand out, sir. All I ask is that you consider our actions' effects. A few weeks ago, I might have had a different outlook on your actions." David stroked his chin. "And perhaps you went too far in going all in on direct combat against the terrorist cells. But I remember times in my career when I disobeyed orders because it was the right thing to do. I remember doing that with you." Calvin leaned back and let out a sigh. "We had to help, sir. The Zevlots were getting their asses handed to them, and I lost good men to those terrorists." David took a moment before responding. "Yes, I read the report, and probably would have done the same thing. What's the situation now?" "Who knows, sir?" Calvin shrugged. "We stopped the asteroid attacks and helped Zevlot and Zavlot security forces round up nearly anyone who's ever tried to use violence, espoused violence, or supported terrorist groups. Something tells me plenty of people out there are willing to try to kill one another, though. You can't change the heart with force." David bit his lip. "That comes from Hashem. But, to your point, we can stop the worst of them from harming others. I'm recalling you to the Lion effective immediately. We'll have Major Almeida take over here." Calvin's chest tightened. "Is this a punishment, sir?" "Absolutely not." David seemed to stare through him. "I need my best Marine to help deal with these nanites. You read the briefing?" "Yes, sir, horrific things, but killable with Saurian plasma weapons, which we're in short supply of. I want your best people on the problem. Perhaps working with Hayworth and the other scientists, we can figure out something else that works." Calvin nodded. "Of course, sir. What about the others?" "We'll see. I'm hopeful that the threat of impending doom on both worlds will force a truce, at least for the time being." "You'd think multiple brushes with planet-wide disaster would have had the same effect." David rose and held out his hand. "Unorthodox as usual, Colonel. But that's how we both roll. No, I noticed in your report how you dealt with prisoner questioning, and I commend you for keeping it within the confines of the UCMJ. It wasn't always easy, sir. Doing right isn't. That's kind of the point, my friend." Calvin shook his hand. "Thank you." David grinned. "Now get out of here before I change my mind." "Yes, sir." Calvin smiled in return before turning to go, pleased he hadn't misjudged the situation, and that the stars on David's shoulders hadn't gone to his head. Too many good officers get messed up by those higher ranks. Good thing our skipper isn't one of them. And now we get to fight micro-robots that can shapeshift at will. What I wouldn't do to be back fighting the damn Leaguers.